Welcome back, everybody. This is a very special episode to me. I think this is going to be a really great one. I have here with me my good friend Brendan. Brendan, how you doing, man?
Pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing very well. Very fantastic right now. We're going to be talking about Deep Space Nine as a whole Star Trek spin-off series. Started off in 1993, and man,
it's pretty good.
it's pretty fucking good, dude. Like, I started this about a month and a half ago, and I just finished it last week. So I've had about a week to contain my emotions and really start thinking about it. Dude,
I gotta say, that's like a record time for finishing Star Trek. 7 seasons. 7 seasons. I know each episode is give or take 45 minutes, and there's like 23 episodes each.
There's
season.
actually 25, 27 in every single season. It's when I
a lot of content.
When I started doing the math, I really thought about it. Like, damn, how much time have I invested into Star Trek over the last couple of years? But you know what? It's been great times. It's been a lot of really good stuff, and I have to thank you for getting me into the series. But
of course,
man,
and keep in mind this is the 3rd Star Trek series you've watched.
Exactly. And it's my favorite right now. It's definitely holding its spot as my favorite for a lot of different reasons. But let's first off get into the premise of it. We have Benjamin Lafayette Sisko, which I thought was a really cool touch on his name. Funny to mention this. When I was living in San Diego, there's a hotel called the Lafayette Hotel where Frank Sinatra used to go and sing. When I found out that his middle name was Lafayette, I had like PTSD in a good way, of course, but I would keep thinking about those mornings I would go and have brunch with my buddy Junior, and we'd just be sitting there getting drunk off our asses. And then I would just imagine, what if in some really crazy universe, what if I would turn to my right or my left and see Benjamin Lafayette Sisko.
Or Vic Fontaine. Or Vic Fontaine on stage, jamming away and Frank Sinatra's,
But it was a really cool scene in my mind, in my imagination. I was like, fuck, dude, despite what's going on, once that hotel opens up, I'm going back and I'm going to have that same PTSD imagination, like, where is Benjamin Lafayette Sisko?
So he starts off the series as a commander. Right?
Correct. Yep. He starts off as commander, having a flashback to the
first black main character. Well, I guess Worf is technically a black main character, but
right.
captain
Right.
Or commander. Head honcho.
The big cheese, and he's having a flashback of when the Borg attacks his ship, and he actually sees his wife die before his eyes. Then gives him PTSD of ever taking command of a ship again, and he gets assigned over to Deep Space Nine, which is a space station in the Alpha Quadrant, spanning over New Bajora? Is that what it's called, or just Bajora?
See, I'm going through a rewatch right now, and they call it Bajor.
Okay,
but in the episode we watched, they called it New Bajor. It was just called Bajor.
We'll just stick with Bajor.
Bajor.
He gets assigned there, and previously Bajor went through an occupation with the Cardassians.
Basically, World War II. The Cardassians are basically like Nazi Germany. Occupying this peaceful planet. They're like an artistic people. Not very warlike, and they basically just ruled with an iron fist, put them to work in like death camps, mines. It's pretty dark for Star Trek.
It was a really dark turn from the last 2 series that I was familiar with. So, having it start off with that, I was like, okay, this is really interesting already. Now we're coming out of a very strong battle with the Borg that we're all pretty familiar with. The Borg are a very intensive race that just assimilate anything that comes near them. Now going into the Cardassians that are just this brutalized species of people that, like you said, rule with an iron fist. And now Benjamin Sisko has the chance to take on his role as commander of the space station, but he's finding himself with not a lot of resolve to do it, and I honestly don't blame him, because he's leaving his home on Earth to go live in space again with his son, Jake Sisko. And he's
his young son, on like a... So this space station was created by the Cardassians. Cardassians. Kardashians. No, the Cardassians. So it's like a very, it's not like a very comfortable space station. It's like
Most definitely not.
It's not what you think of like a, like couches everywhere or something. Like, very, no,
Right.
It's all like metal, dark.
And it even had its own mining facility as well. Yeah. So, he's coming from his nice home on Earth over to this, and he's having a lot of hard time, finding his resolve to do it. But now this is where I really started liking Deep Space Nine just right off the bat. As you mentioned, the Bajorans are the very artistic type of people, but they're also very religious.
Yeah.
And
religion really isn't a big part in Star Trek up until this point. I mean, we have, like the one-offs and like Next Gen about like a religious race, I just think of off the top of my head, like one where Picard becomes a god to these people.
Yes.
But every time they touched on it, it was always very superficial. Mm-hmm. And they touched on Bajor a little bit in Next Generation.
Yes, with Rolaren.
Yeah. But they never dove deep like Deep Space Nine did, which I really appreciate about the show.
It was a really cool twist. I really enjoyed it. But they have what they would consider a pope, in modern day, which is the Kai. And this specific character was the Kai Opaka. And she was badass through and through. I loved her to death. But the one thing that really got me was how they use the word faith. It's actually changed into their pah, which when I heard that and I was reading it with subtitles, I'm like, that is not how I would say that word. P-A-G-H, pah?
Paf.
I would look at it like, pah.
Well, you look at it and you assume it's like some Klingon word.
Exactly, right.
Pah.
I saw that, and then she goes up to Cisco and says, you are the emissary. You're going to lead us, the way to the prophets and to the celestial temple. He's kind of looking at her like, all right, dude, I don't know what you're smoking.
Okay. Someone like on the street saying that they're like the Messiah or something. But, imagine you're getting told by the Pope of this people that just went over like this horrible, horrible occupation. They're trying to rebuild. You're trying to, build them up to get them, because Bajor is not in the Federation. And basically Cisco is there to help facilitate them building themselves back up and then hopefully bring them into the Federation. Mm-hmm. But yeah, imagine you're put in this position. You're a commander. Your wife just died. You have your son brought off Earth. And now this Pope is telling you, hey, by the way, you're basically like our Messiah. Or not our Messiah. Messiah is the wrong word. Prophet. Right. You're very like... You're one of the most. You're like the most important prophet, basically.
Right.
You're our link. You're the link to our gods, basically.
And you've been on our textures like throughout all of Bajoran history. And you just, again, my first reaction if someone was to tell me that, like, I don't know what you're smoking, man, but let me get some of that, please.
I don't want to be your prophet, but I will take what you're smoking.
And then he goes through an experience with one of his best friends, which. Just to describe what his best friend is a Trill, which is an alien race that survives through hundreds of centuries through a parasite that is essentially a symbiote.
It's a big old slug.
It is a big old slug.
It's a big ugly fucking slug that they put in the stomach.
You would think it would be a little bit more appealing, but so this slug has
they do get sexy dots though.
Oh yeah, they do. They got me acting strange, but they essentially this symbiote lives throughout all these centuries and finds different hosts. Now this one goes by the name of Dax, which is a very much revered person in all of, I want to say, Federation history, because especially with the last host Curzon Dax, which now turns into Jadzia Dax.
Curzon, by the way, is a man.
Yes,
so he's formerly the Trill. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, because I forgot to mention that. So the Dax symbiote is part of the Trill species. So anyone that is a Trill can actually have this type of symbiote. They just go by different names. Now, the Dax symbiote actually was best friends to Benjamin Sisko when he was just a young lad in Starfleet Academy. Now, in the first
old man too, yeah. Yep. So he's like basically a mentor to Sisko, but also like a bro. They got down to some stuff.
But, he ends up finding that the new host, Jadzia Dax, which is a female, because the host doesn't matter if it's male or female as long as they're compatible with the symbiote. So he has an experience with Dax inside the wormhole, which is residing right outside of Deep Space Nine, which is really interesting because as they're going through this whole interaction, Jadzia has no recollection of what's going on. It's all Sisko. And his experience is with the Bajoran prophets that Kyle Paka had mentioned to him very previously, that you're going to be the one to open the pathway to the Celestial Temple and speak with the prophets. And from there, they essentially tell him, you have a path, you have a road, you have things that you have to do, and we will help you. Because at first they didn't really understand what he was, what a corporeal, that's the term that they use, human life actually is, that they live in a linear space versus them that they are just encompassed in all kinds of space. They can go back, forward, and stay in the middle of time. Now, the thing I really liked about it that kind of fucked me up was that they kept bringing him back to his wife. And he kept asking them, why are you bringing me back here? Why are you bringing me back to the moment when she died? And then they said, it's because you keep coming back here, because you died here, and now your life is starting over.
They say you live here.
Yep. And now
Cisco's been talking about, like, this isn't my home. It's important to mention. So the Celestial Temple is technically it's located in a wormhole that appears in the first episode. All this happens in the first episode. And it seems like a lot, but it's a pretty good first episode. It really sets it all up. So a wormhole appears. And it's the first stable wormhole in recorded history, right, for them. And when they go through this wormhole, it brings them to the other side, to the Gamma Quadrant, which is so far away.
It would take them hundreds of years to get over to the Gamma Quadrant.
And they're like, wow, so we got this first stable wormhole. So then Jadzia Dax and Cisco, they go back, back to Deep Space Nine, which is located right by the wormhole. And they get stuck in the wormhole. And this is where all this is happening. So Jadzia doesn't see any of this, but Cisco starts to get all these visions, and it's like almost seems like an hallucination at first, but it's him encountering these quote unquote celestial beings, which are basically just aliens,
or like what he calls the wormhole aliens.
Yeah, wormhole aliens. He calls them the wormhole aliens because he's Starfleet officer, not very spiritual at all, especially, with his dead wife.
And he's really a man of science.
Yeah. But the Bajorans believe these aliens are basically their gods, their prophets. Yeah.
So he goes through this whole experience with them, and he then starts to realize that, maybe there is something out here for him that wasn't there on Earth. Maybe he's, now he's ready to accept the death of his wife and move on in his life. When he returns back to Deep Space Nine, one thing we forgot to mention, though, because this is what got me really hyped about the first episode, is that we actually saw Picard again.
Oh, yeah.
I completely forgot about this whole interaction. But before he goes into the wormhole, he talks to Picard, and because Picard was actually taken over by the Borg and destroyed a lot of what was going on Earth and in the Federation.
During the two-parter in Next Gen, Best of Both Worlds, Picard becomes Locutus of Borg and basically leads an attack on Earth. And this is the attack that killed Cisco's wife. But we're seeing this. That's where the show starts, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And it opens with like a nice little Star Wars text scroll where it explains what's happening. And then you see Cisco's wife die. When Cisco meets Picard, he isn't exactly thrilled to see him. Picard's really nice. He's just like, oh, we need you to look over the Bajorans while they rebuild.
He goes, well, you're just a fucking asshole.
He's like, shut the fuck up, Baldy. Grow some hair, bitch.
So he's a complete douche, for lack of a better word, over to Picard. But when he has his experience with the prophets, the wormhole aliens, he goes back to Picard and says, you know what? I didn't really want to take assignment at first. I was even considering leaving Starfleet. But you know what? I'm going to stay. And I'm going to see this through. So that's where we end off the first episode of Deep Space Nine, with Benjamin Sisko finding his resolve to start his life over and potentially see what these wormhole aliens have in store for him.
And it's good to note, since it's a big reason why we both love Deep Space Nine so much, is the character development in it within almost all the characters. In all honesty, aside from, I'd say, Data and Next Gen, all the characters are basically the same throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
I definitely agree with you on that. And
already in episode 1, we have such a rapid shift within Cisco where he's just like totally basically blocked off all of his emotions to like anything. He's just like, I want to run away. He's basically running away from how he feels. And already in the first episode, he finally confronts the way he feels about the event of his wife dying, reconciles with it, and says, you know what, I'm not going to let this beat me. he sticks it through. And that's one of the central themes of Deep Space Nine that's really powerful, because it makes it feel more real to me. Like, of course, it's a sci-fi show, but really Star Trek has always been about character relationships and like how people interact with each other, and it's basically a very human show.
Correct. And I mean when you really think about it, in its most granular form, you're in space with a whole bunch of people, and they're the same people. You're running into the same individuals. It's like living in a small town. You're always going to see these people, but in Star Trek, you interact with them all the time. It's not because you don't have to. It's because you want to. You build these relationships and you see how they grow. You see how some diminish. In Deep Space Nine, you really get so much of that. Versus in the last two series, I didn't really see too much of it. Like, you kind of already know that they have a great relationship.
Yeah, they kind of start with a great relationship and never, like, the only time, of course, there's like little things where Picard will be like, "Fuck you, Riker," but at the end of the episode, they're best buddies again, and there's really no residual effects of that. But in Deep Space Nine, it's all, because it takes place on a space station as opposed to a starship. There's a lot less bottle episodes where everything gets resolved at the end. And what I really like about Deep Space Nine is that stuff doesn't get resolved all the time. A lot of stuff is left up in the open, and that's the way life is. Nothing gets resolved at the end of the day.
Exactly.
It continues on to the next day,
exactly.
Which is really sweet.
And the other part of that too is that in day-to-day life, you don't always have the best relationship with people, like, off the bat. Yeah. And the way Deep Space Nine, you get introduced to the characters, they don't have the best relationship. Like, you have Jadzia Dax and Benjamin Sisko, who already know each other, essentially.
So they're friends, basically. Yeah.
But he even notes that,
oh yeah, it'll be weird.
You're not Curzon. You're not my mentor.
Still calls him old man, though.
Exactly.
Which is a little hot. You can call this really hot.
Call me daddy.
I want to feel you, old man. All right.
But, and then you have a character, Major Kira, who was a colonel for the Bajoran militia, who
really hates Starfleet.
Yeah, she hates Starfleet. But towards the end of the series, you start to really see how she knows that Bajor needs Starfleet. They need the Federation. They need to build this relationship with all of these different, species, because that's how they're going to survive.
As far as that goes, it's understandable for, at least specifically, Kira, because she's Commander Sisko's second in command. She is not Starfleet. She's Bajoran militia, basically, and now she's Bajoran military. Now that they are they're back to being in control of themselves, basically. But at the start of the series, she sees the Federation as basically just another occupying force.
Pretty
because
much,
they went through this brutal
Cardassia.
Yeah. I mean, at first I was always really irritated with Major Kira, because she's like really
she's really annoying.
Yeah, really annoying, kind of shrill, just like kind of like. But when you take a step back, you put yourself in her shoes. She basically she murdered Cardassians for a living, trying to free Bajor. And as soon as she does, Starfleet comes in and is just like, well,
we're gonna
whether you like it or not, we're here.
Exactly. And I could definitely see her resentment towards the Federation, because she had spent all her life, as you find out throughout the entire series, she spent all of her life from a child fighting the Cardassians. Yeah. Trying to stand her ground for Bajor and do everything that she can for her faith as well. And then all of a sudden you get big badass Benjamin Sisko, hey, you're going to listen to me and you're going to have to do it and you're going to like it. It's like, no, sir. no, ma'am, we're not doing this here. But, we get this very strong character development. Like, we get the first episode with Benjamin Sisko, but it even expands beyond that. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But, Major Kira is also the same way. She starts off very shrill, very annoyed with everything going on, but then she understands, no, we need this here because it's... And the thing that I really like about it is that she understands it's not for her. It's for her people, and that's who she's always been. Towards the end of the series, where she has to help the Cardassians try and reclaim their homeworld, she makes the point, if you're not going to do it, nobody is going to do it. You have to be the one to fight for your people. And it's one of those things, again, that it makes you realize, yes, this is a fiction show. It's all sci-fi. None of it's real. But you can very much relate to this in your own day-to-day life. Maybe you've gone through something that kind of makes you feel like, no, I have to stand up for myself. Maybe not in such a drastic type of way, but it gives you the idea, the principle of, no. I have to stand for what I believe in. And seeing that with Major Kira, and along with other characters of the show, like Odo and Quark, it's something that you really start to respect upon. Because it's, I mean, at least for me, it was so much fun to see this character really grow up. You know, I'm the kind of guy that when I get into a series, when I start reading a book or watching something, even playing a game, if the character has so much going for them that they start growing up on their own, it's almost like, you know, watching your pet grow up, you know, from having it as an infant to growing up to be a huge pet. And that's the thing that really got to me is that, you know, from Deep Space Nine as opposed to the other two series, is that I got really attached to these characters much more than I thought that I did in the last series.
In all Star Trek series, they kind of, you know, make it out that, so the crew basically is a family, right? That's usually what they do. Specifically for DS9, they do a really great job because, you know, a family is never perfect. Especially in the first episode, like, we have Dr. Julian Bashir come on the station, and he's
a badass.
Yeah, he is really horny for the first like season. But he comes on the station in the first episode. He's just like, I'm here to do real frontier medicine. I'm here to, you know, like he's out like basically he's very ignorant, kind of like full of himself. And, you know, he's still full of himself throughout the series.
And still just as horny.
Yeah, exactly. But eventually he gets his. All the characters seem rather annoyed with Julian. But as the series goes on, you get like, so there's a whole entire episode like dedicated to O'Brien from Next Generation, the transporter chief, one of my favorite characters. So cool that he got brought on.
See, you know, hold on. I'm sorry for a second. Because when I was watching Next Generation, I loved O'Brien. He was great. And then there was a certain point where he just left. And I remember,
you were like, where did he go?
Yeah, I remember pausing it when they went to go transport. And they said some different chief. And I paused. I'm like, that's not the guy. Where did he go?
Where's that Irishman?
What happened? And then he comes back later. And then he goes away again. But then when I look at the time frame of where Deep Space Nine happens, you know, in conjunction with Next Generation, I'm like, oh, that's where he went.
Yeah, because they aired partly at the same time.
When I was watching, actually, when I saw him come back, I was like, I really hope you're here throughout the entire season. And when I was watching Deep Space Nine, Grant was ahead of me for a little bit. And I think him and you also mentioned me, oh, no, he's here to stay. I was like, oh, thank God, dude. I loved him. He is one of the best comic reliefs I've seen in the show in a long time.
It's pretty good. And like, you know, a lot of people are irritated. Well, because, you know, from Next Gen, he marries Keiko, who I really, it's a shame because I just think they just didn't write Keiko very well.
Yeah, unfortunately.
They basically, all they did was, I think the actress did a fine job. They didn't really know what to do with her except make her like kind of like something that O'Brien has to deal with. You know, it's like, oh, Keiko's sad. All right, so this is going to be the plot line for this, or the B plot for this. It's like I have to figure out how to make Keiko happy, as opposed to, you know, making her own thing. Oh, all right, we made her a teacher for Deep Space Nine. It's like, okay.
Oh, and now she's going back to be a botanist. But I do like the shift when they do send her off to be a botanist again. Unfortunately, again, great actress. She got some really shitty writing.
Yeah.
But with her being gone, O'Brien now had the chance to build a relationship with somebody else in the station, which then became one of my favorite boys.
His man wife.
Julian Bashir. Oh my gosh. Okay, so the episode...
Best bromance in all of Star Trek. Here.
So good.
Darts? How does he say darts? You never played darts?
No, when they have the episode where they're essentially almost dying together.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Speak to speak.
I've always respected you.
Yeah. No, the line that got me was, well, yeah, you love your wife. Yeah, but I like you more. When I saw that, and this is throwing no shade to anybody in any community. No shade at all. But when I saw that, I was like, wow, that's pretty insert word here. But, you know, I thought it was, in a way, for lack of a better word, very cute, because you see how much they care for each other as friends. You know, like, not, they've gone beyond the past of being coworkers. They've gone beyond the past of just being friends. Like, no, it's like, yeah, you love your wife, you love your family, and I love the people that I love, which at that point was Ezri Dax, you know, for Bashir.
Yeah.
But you're my best friend.
Yeah.
And I respect you, and that if I'm going to go, I hope that the last words or the last things that your wife knows is that how much you love her but that you also like me more. that whole little twist, I was like, okay, you know what? This is a great scene.
There's so many scenes like that throughout the entire show.
There was so many
juicy nuggets all throughout.
So good. Especially how they always spend all their time in the holosuites doing...
Oh, yeah, like doing like bro shit. Like they're like, all right, we're going to play fighter pilots today. And it's just like, oh boy.
Oh, hey, we're going to go to the Alamo today.
It's just like, okay. Like they just like play war with each other. It's very cute. It's very romantic.
It's like you said, the best bromance in all of Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
Right then and there. As far as I've seen, best bromance ever. But you know, we get these characters that, again, it starts off with a very chaotic situation. You know, Bajor just went through all this stuff with Cardassia. You know, the Federation has just gone through their war with the Borg. You know, everyone is just kind of torn apart in their own way.
Mm-hmm. Everyone's broken, really.
And they find ways to mend that with each other, which I think was one of the more beautiful things about the show and about the cast as a whole. Because, again, reference to the other series, everyone's already a family. And this one, they're not. You know, they have to find ways to endure each other, especially, and this is going to be a great way to get into one of our both favorite characters, Odo.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, Odo.
Now, backstory on Odo. He's a changeling, shapeshifter, whatever you want to say. Verbiage is fine, but I prefer changeling at this point.
Shapeshifter was their way of, like, you know, there's like a slur towards him, basically. Everyone goes, the shapeshifter. Keep in mind, when we start the series, all we know about Odo is that, you know, he's the only one of his race that we know of, and he can shapeshift into anything, basically. But he hasn't perfected looking like a human, so he kind of looks like a pancake face.
Yep. With big old
mannequin.
ears.
Big old ears, yeah. But they grow on you.
But Odo, I mean, he already, with that preface alone, he's the only one of his race that he knows of. You know, that anybody knows of. So he already feels alienated. Just going back to Kira and Sisko, who have gone through what they've went through. Now Odo has always lived alone his entire life. He's been experimented on. People look at him as a jokester, like, oh, can you transform into this? Can you transform into that? Like, no, I don't really want to do that, but of course I'll do whatever it takes.
Yeah, the second episode is basically like, he almost gets lynched in the second episode. I think it's the second episode, because someone frames him for their own murder. Like,
exactly.
And it's just, it's a through line character development. He's just another character that just, like, he starts off very shut down, very much, you know, alone. He's very antagonistic with everyone, is always very short with everyone, but slowly, as we go on, he just gets, like, cooler and cooler, and just, like, more
bona fide badass.
Yeah.
But I
Chief of security, by the way.
Yep, and that's exactly what I was about to say. The most interesting trope about Odo is the fact that they made him be so alone that the one role he found himself being so attached to was this form of justice.
Yeah.
And he was a form of justice throughout the Cardassian occupation with Bajor. And he's now the chief of security for Deep Space Nine once Sisko comes in.
So now he has to obey Federation rules.
Exactly.
And it's very humorous to, like, see him just like, I have to obey these Federation rules. Can't I just follow him and throw him in jail?
Exactly.
And they're like, no, Odo, you can't. Sorry.
Like I think it was the whole first season and partly into the second season, Odo's like, you know, if I didn't have all these Federation rules, this would just be great. I could do whatever I wanted. And Sisko always comes in, no, Odo, you can't do that.
Odo, if you won't do the job, I will find someone who can. By the way, I'll talk a lot about Benjamin Sisko's whisper yell. That's so the best way. He's just like, he's so good at, like, being quiet, but also still being booming, and just like an angry dad. Like, I always shrink when Sisko gets mad at someone, because I'm just like,
the angry dad at the supermarket who doesn't want everyone else to know he's
put down the goddamn cereal. I told you last time you will eat your Cheerios.
Odo is great. I grew to love him so much. Again, I mean, personally, I resonated with him a lot because he felt like he was alone growing up. Kind of felt the same way. You know, there's a couple different moments where I was like, okay, I have all these friends, but go back to my own private time. It never really felt like I was home anywhere. Never really felt like I had a family. So seeing him go through that kind of motion, and then, you know, you end up finding out halfway through the series that he does have a species somewhere. You know, he does have family somewhere, but they're not the family you would like. It's kind of like finding
Imagine, like, you find out, like, say you're adopted, and you find out that your real parents are just like a fucking piece of shit. Like,
Fucking, they beat their animals. And
just like total garbage.
Horrible people. But we'll get into that section later. Yeah. But he kind of finds himself to realize that, those are my people. Like, they are also changelings, but my family is with the term solid, is with the human race, is with any other race that's not
with his
them.
friends. Like, basically his friends become his family, which is very, very touching. I would also like to talk about Odo in regards to how he's made me feel. Like, so I watched Deep Space Nine my freshman year of college on a really shitty Android pad, very small, probably like the size of my hand, in the rec room. Like, just with headphones on, like laying on the couch because I didn't want to be in my dorm room.
Was that the same rec room that we probably went into?
Yeah. It was the exact same rec room. Yeah, because I hated my roommate. I hated being in that room. I just went, laid on the couch and watched Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And, as a freshman in college in another state, already I had trouble getting along with people.
Right.
Like, not like when I was going to high school, like with all these people all the time, but moving to a new state, had very little friends, and I always felt like Odo a lot, and I think that's why I really liked him so much, was just because, I was very prickly. I still am prickly, but, he's just always very gruff and, like, very, like, kind of seems mean at first, but then as you get to know him, and then throughout the series, he just all of a sudden, he just does some really touching things throughout, like, the show that are just like, damn.
And that's...
You just have to get to know him, or you just need to let him open up, and it's just like,
exactly. It's...
Again, I mean, a lot of the characters are like that. Once they open up, they finally,
Exactly. And that's what I love about Deep Space Nine, is that every character has, I feel like, their own... And this is just coming from my writer's perspective. Because the way I write stories is that, like, I like to put different parts of myself in my characters. And while watching Deep Space Nine...
Write what you know.
Exactly.
Don't write what you don't know.
And as I was watching it, I just felt so much that I could definitely see that, because just the life-to-life things that I've experienced, and then seeing it happen on screen, on my computer monitor.
On my shitty Android pad.
It made me think more and more that, it just takes a good story and a really well-defined character with great development to make anybody be relatable to it, and then have you find your own solace in it as well, which I think was what I really enjoyed about Deep Space Nine. Like, every character I could relate to in some kind of way. Odo was a really strong one for me, and Bashir as well. We'll get into him a little bit later, but it just really defines much more. And I keep saying it, but the love for Deep Space Nine that I have, like, I haven't seen Voyager yet, but I'm holding a really high bar.
You might want to lower that bar a bit. No offense to any Voyager fans out there.
We will most likely do a Voyager one as well. But, as far as right now, we have Cisco, we have Dax, we have Kira, we have Odo, we've mentioned Bashir and Quark. I mean, those are really the big hitters before we get into some really interesting characters.
We didn't really go into Quark as much.
Oh, no, we haven't mentioned Quark or Bashir too much yet.
We kind of gave a little bit of a backstory on Bashir, but just so you know, Quark, he's a Ferengi. He was on the station during the occupation with Cardassia. And as soon as the Cardassians leave, in the first episode, Quark is about to leave. He says, there's no more profit here. Federation's going to come in, put in all these rules. I can't operate my bar this way, which is really great, which is one of the first times we get to kind of see Cisco get his hands a little dirty. Quark's brother's son gets caught, I think, trying to steal something or doing something that he's not supposed to, something illegal. And basically, Cisco, in order to keep, a social place on the station, Quark's bar, he blackmails Quark into staying on the station by saying, like, well, we could keep Nog in prison for the rest of his life, or you can stay on the station and keep your bar open. I would say at first, I'm sure Quark doesn't respect any Federation officer at all. He just like treats them, he's just like, oh, they're just a bunch of peons, blah, blah, blah. But once he sees that he almost has a worthy adversary in Cisco, he it's almost like a challenge to someone like Quark, I'd think, that to stay on the station.
And just to mention, the Ferengi species is all about profit.
Yeah.
I don't know if I told you this a few weeks ago. I think when I was in the middle of Deep Space Nine, I had to do it. I couldn't help myself. I bought the rules of acquisition.
There's the 69th rule of acquisition. There's always dinner for two.
So the rules of acquisition are the laws that the Ferengi
almost like the commandments of the Ferengi, but they're nothing to do with religion.
Oh, absolutely. They're all about profit. I should have brought it with me. They're so good. We'll have to pick some out later. But it's Quark definitely was a character that really grew on me because I really
hated the Ferengi. I'm going to be honest. They sucked.
When I first met the Ferengi in Next Gen, I was like,
"They're so annoying. They just hiss and like
you're slimy. You cry a lot. Like you're a bunch of weaklings. Like you run away.
Very
at first
ugly.
sight. You know, I could not stand them. But then watching Deep Space Nine and watching Quark, I realized I was like, you know what? Maybe I was being a racist.
I mean, Armin Shimmerman. Shimmerman does a really good job, and it's interesting to note. I'm just going to say it now before I forget that there are a lot of like characters that play main characters in Deep Space Nine. A lot of the races in Deep Space Nine didn't really have a big part in Next Generation. Like you meet the Ferengi, you meet the Cardassians, you meet the Bajorans in Next Gen, but in Deep Space Nine they actually get main characters that are part of these races. And what's cool is that the first Ferengi that you see in Next Generation was played by Armin Shimmerman.
Which he also does. I don't know if I mentioned this to you before. He does the voice for one of my favorite video game franchises. He is the Andrew Ryan voice, and
does a great job too.
When I realized that, because after a certain point, I started looking into like what all the actors were doing. You know, like post Deep Space Nine, and when I got to Quark, that made me like him that much more. I mean, my first tattoo were the chains on the wrist from BioShock 1, and when I found out that Quark was Andrew Ryan. I mean, if you go back and look up Quark in any scene in Deep Space Nine, and then you go back to any scene in BioShock 1 where you hear Andrew Ryan's voice, you look at it like, no.
No way.
There's no way it's the same guy.
Because Quark talks like this.
But there's an episode where he uses a normal voice, where he's like a writer.
Oh, yeah. He's like, isn't he like an editor or something? Yeah. That's a good episode.
And when I saw that,
real.
I could hear Andrew Ryan before he was even born. I was like, I know you're there. And I'm so happy because I can see the resemblance now. But again, the Ferengis are all about profit. And like you said, we had a preface to all these different species, all these different races. But in Deep Space Nine, we get full frontal assault of, okay, these are actual characters that we're going to be...
they're not just like token villains,
exactly.
That you get fleshed out. Same with the main villain of the series, Gul Dukat, which we'll talk about him later. Oh, you bet your ass we'll talk about him. But again, him... damn, what's his name?
Damar?
No, I'm trying to think of the actor's name.
Oh, Mark Alamo.
Yeah, Mark Alamo played the first Cardassian that you ever see.
Which is Gul Dukat. And...
Best villain ever written.
Honestly,
in my opinion.
I've read a lot of books, played a lot of video games. I've watched a lot of anime. I've watched a lot of TV shows in my 26, almost 27 years of life. And Gul Dukat...
He never ceases to amaze. You learn something new about him, and he brings you one way, and then just the next episode, he'll bring you right back down to Earth.
If there was a guy that you could describe as Laffy Taffy with the way he pulls you both directions, that's Gul Dukat. I hate him, but I love him so much at the same time. Great villain. Fuck it, we already talked about Quark. We talked about...
we got through the main cast, basically.
We got to the main cast, now let's get into Gul Dukat. Because Gul Dukat, so essentially, he was the commanding officer of Deep Space Nine, which was previously called Terok Nor when the Cardassians were in the occupation, ruling over Bajor. And he was exactly what you think a commanding officer would be in that time. You know, we've already given you the preface that Bajor was going through a lot of things with Cardassia, that they were just ruling with an iron fist. Gul Dukat is exactly that, but much more. He's a very manipulative, very destructive person.
He's got that dictator dictator gene about him, like a benevolent dictator. Like he's doing this to help you. He's very like a lot of the times he goes like, I'm trying to be as kind, like I'm being so nice by not murdering all of you. I'm only murdering like 2 of you, and why are you guys still mad at me? Like I'm helping you out. Like he's that kind of person, and it's just like we know a lot of we've seen a lot of history. We know a lot of people that are like that, who have been like that.
And you know,
tension Bajorans.
The thing about Gul Dukat is that he got away with it, you know. And then as he starts coming back into the series, because once you first see him, he doesn't come back for a little while.
Yeah,
you kind of start to notice that maybe he's not a bad guy. Maybe he was just playing, you know, he was just
put in a bad position, following orders.
Exactly, you know. But then after that certain point, you realize, no, this guy is pure evil. All he wants to do is
very manipulative.
He wants to see the world burn. There's a specific episode. We'll get into the finer details later, but essentially he wants to make a Kool-Aid Jim Jones thing go on. And when I saw that scene happen, I paused it. I'm like, dude, I've seen this kind of thing happen before in fiction, but they never did it really well. But this one, they did it phenomenally. He was ready to have this entire group of people take a pill to kill themselves, and he was never going to take the pill. He was just going to watch them all die so he can fulfill his role as being this counterpart to Benjamin Sisko as an emissary for the Pa-Wraiths, which are the anti-prophets for the Bajoran religion. Now, when I saw that, I realized more and more, this guy he is pure evil. Like, I've seen some real evil characters, but this guy, he just took the cake. Like, dude, no, man, you can't do that.
I think what makes him so evil is that he comes off as very charming.
Oh yeah,
he's a very charming person.
Oh yeah,
and I mean, when you do like cult, a lot of like cult leaders are always very like charming.
Exactly,
and he just does it so well. And it's like he's at first like you were saying, it's just like, okay, maybe he was just put in a bad position, but then something happens, and you're just like, wow. No, he's literally just like putting on a face. Like that was just like a face he ripped off, and now he's an asshole again.
And he's, you know, what's great is that he fools everybody. He fools every single person in the entire cast. Like, oh no,
now he's good. He's good now. Like, yeah, he's not as bad.
But the more you interact with Gul Dukat, the more you realize. And I think the only character that continuously saw it was Kira. That no, you are just evil. You are pure evil. Why should I ever listen to you? She always saw it. But Gul Dukat, whoever thought him up, they did a great job because, again, as a writer, I mean, in 2 of my stories, I've actually thought about having my antagonist be very similar to him. You know, very, very benevolent, but also it's kind of like, you know, I didn't really want to do it, but I kind of had to. But I'm going to keep doing it anyway because I want to do it, you know, for private sake. So when I saw Gul Dukat just be this character that I've always wanted to write, I just kept looking at him like, God, I hate you so much, but you're so cool. But
well, that's what's so good, and it's like the acting in DS9 is just so incredible that it takes I know on a theater person note,
as we're both theater people, you know, and I think, and we're gonna go off on tangent, but you know, I think that's why I really love Star Trek as a whole, because you know, I started off in theater as a child, and then I strayed away from it. Then I came back to it very much later in high school, where I ended up meeting you, Brendan, and you know, then getting into Star Trek and realizing, and we've had this conversation many times. Yeah, Star Trek is just fucking Shakespeare, but
Shakespeare in space.
but it's so good, you know, and
because Shakespeare is a study in humanity. Sorry if you don't like Shakespeare, but just buy No Fear Shakespeare and read it side by side, and then you'll realize how good it is.
Exactly. And you know, seeing specifically Deep Space Nine as opposed to Next Generation, the original series, it's so Shakespeare. It's so much theater that it's so great because a lot of it is very grandiose, with the way Gul Dukat can act in certain situations, with the way Cisco acts, when he tries to be the emissary of the prophets for the Bajoran people and also be a Starfleet officer, then going over to Odo, who's having his internal struggles of trying to find out who he is and being his own individual person. You have all these different
Hamlet.
Exactly. We have all these different great literary allusions, whatever you want to call it, whatever the word is. I can't think
there's
of it.
There's so many connections that you can draw to just all other media in existence that you're just like, oh God, this was made by someone who really loves
theater as a
whole,
and
just writing and just it's just you can tell when you look at like the people that they that they cast in these shows. It's like Avery Brooks, Shakespearean actor, I believe. Don't quote me on that. I'm pretty sure he is. But, Patrick Stewart, definite Shakespeare actor. Shatner, Leonard Nimoy. Like, they all had this background in theater before
I think Gul
TV.
Dukat, Mark Alamo was also...
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Like, I haven't looked, but you can just feel it when you watch these characters that they definitely... Because the way Star Trek is shot, it's not shot as, like, a bombastic... like cut here, cut here, cut here.
Right.
It's very much it's a sitcom, and I don't mean I love sitcom is not a negative term when I say sitcom. I mean it's literally a group of people, or better yet, when it's just two people in a room talking to each other, and when they play off each other, you can just feel it. It's so fucking good. And we don't get that. Like we got that lately. The only show, in my personal opinion, that I've watched was like Breaking Bad. Like I got that from Breaking Bad because there's a lot of scenes where it's just like Walter and Skyler. That's a very, if you can imagine it on the stage and it still plays, it's good. It's like a that's theater.
Hold on, we got to clip that right now for Twitch. But no, and that's why I think you and I have been friends for many years. But I want to say that. Because we have our theater background and we appreciate theater for what it is, us getting into Star Trek, you getting into it a little bit before I did, and you gave me the invitation for it. Yeah, I see it so much more. And I've told you since I've started watching Star Trek, like, I just want to get back into the theater. I want to get back into something to do with it because it just, through
relights the burner in your soul for it. And it's so good.
It gives me all those emotions that I feel when I watch it. Like, if I could be on stage and if I was given those lines, I would do something very similar, but also very different. And it's so good. And the Star Trek is great. I love Star Trek.
I mean, you watch a lot of stuff now, and personally, I watch a lot of stuff, and I just kind of I zone out. I'm paying attention, and a lot of it is quote unquote good. It's like okay, this is like a cool show. All right, I'm continuing to watch it. Like Star Wars. Well, I'll just say it. Star Wars movies. They're cool. They're fun to watch. I enjoy them. But I never get sad watching a Star Trek movie or a Star Wars movie.
But see, that's the thing, and they don't draw you in. And I was having this conversation with our friend Danny the other day, and I was telling him, I said, and side by side with me watching Star Trek, I was watching Sailor Moon, and a couple other really, really older shows. And I kept telling him, I was like, dude, this is why I don't watch things that just come out recently. Because they have no flavor. They don't have that extra touch.
They don't have soul.
They don't have the soul, man. I need the soul food. I'm hungry. I need to be fed. And these, if I go back to these older shows, I'm so full. It's like I'm going to a buffet. I can't eat enough. And that's why I binge it all in like clearly a month and a half.
It's like, I'm going to have 23 plates of DS9 today.
Please. Oh, you have more.
Did I sleep?
You have more sections? Oh, hold on. I'll come back tomorrow. Same place, same time? You got it. I'll be there.
Is tomorrow Voyager night? Oh, okay, I'll be back tomorrow.
But it's, I just feel like Deep Space Nine brought back a lot of different kinds of love for me for literature and for theater, because as I mentioned to you earlier, I want to read the books. I really do, because the way that Deep Space Nine ended, which we'll get into much later on, it was a lot. It's
a lot to take in.
It was a lot to absorb, and it was a lot to accept, because you've gone through 7 seasons of these characters, and you've seen them go through their hardships, their turmoils, and their happy moments where they're at their best. Then all of a sudden, it's gone.
Yeah,
it's over.
It's final, and that's what I think is beautiful about. Since I mentioned Breaking Bad, in comparison to Deep Space Nine ends, and when it ends, it's over. It's not like the crew is still together.
Yep.
Basically, you know what I mean. But with Next Generation ends, but it's very kind of almost. Don't get me wrong. I love the Next Generation ending.
Same here.
But it's still it's almost too open for me. Yeah. It's just like, oh, what's going to happen next? But with Deep Space Nine, it ends.
It's almost like I need a closure from a really bad relationship.
Yeah.
Which, well.
Oh, shit.
But I definitely agree. I love Next Generation. I love it a lot more than the original series.
Yeah.
Kirk was great. Spock was great. Still my favorite Vulcan ever.
Yeah.
But
both those series, awesome.
Both of them. There's nothing
Watch
wrong.
them.
They're great. Highly recommend them.
Watch them in order.
Yes.
Original series, Next Gen, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, Discovery, Picard. Do it.
Gang. And it's
gang.
And it's all really good. But I highly recommend Deep Space Nine out of all of them.
You know what? If you start on Deep Space Nine, I will forgive you.
Yeah. I honestly, it's...
But just know that you're starting with the best.
you definitely are. It's just too good.
Side note, if you like Battlestar Galactica and you don't like Star Trek, watch Deep Space Nine. All I'll say on that note.
There you go. But I think for right now, we're going to take a short break.
Sounds good to me.
And we will be back
in a flash.
Beam me up. And we are back onto our short leave for Deep Space Nine episode for Bigfmoodpodcast. Here again with my good friend Brendan over here by my side.
What's good?
Man, we talked about a lot of good stuff, man. We gave a lot of good of the preface of the characters we mainly interact with on the show. We ended off with Gul Dukat, which is, again, one of the best villains ever. But we need to go on to the other villains that we have before we go into a little bit more of the deep dive into the show. The next great one is... I hate to talk about her, but she is
You hate one. To see it. You hate to hear her. She's the demon from Bajor.
Kai Wen. But no, Kai Wen, she actually was a teacher of Bajor for the Bajoran religious factor over on Deep Space Nine.
Very much like a
adamant about her being on
like
there.
Very strict
Thorn
to the
in my
rules.
Side.
I'm just talking about like. Well, yes, she's a huge bitch. God, what is the? Anyway, so she's very strict with the. She's traditional. We'll go traditional. Like very like when you read about like. When you read the Bajoran Bible, no, she's very much a
by the book type of person.
Yeah, she, and then you find out later, but she's very into strict religious teachings and very much.
She's the kind of teacher that would spank you on your bottom side if you don't.
She'd fight about evolution, being in schools, basically.
She did not.
And in fact, there is an episode.
Sure.
There's an episode about that.
There is
one of the good Keiko episodes. Actually, is about that.
There's some great episodes with Kai Wen before she becomes Kai. Now,
oh yeah, so she's Vedic Wen,
correct? Now,
which is like a bishop.
I would say it's about a bishop. So let's backtrack a little bit.
She's about a bishop.
So we mentioned earlier Kaiopaka, and Kaiopaka essentially is very much similar to the Pope in modern day age. But before you become the rank of Kai, you actually are a Vedic, which would, again, most similarly term would be a bishop, so to speak. So there's a lot of things that go on, and we won't bore you with all the details, but essentially Vedic Wen becomes
if you're
Kai.
into religious politics,
we'll do a whole nother episode just for you.
We'll talk about just the Bajoran religion. Just kidding.
That'd actually be a really good episode because we have
I was raised Catholic, so it actually might be a little interesting.
And so was I.
Oh shit.
Stay tuned for the shore leave episode of the Bajoran religion. But anyways, just going back to Kai Wen, it's really interesting because she starts off as a Vedic, and she actually dominates her way through by very underhanded means, and
very much like a Gul Dukat type of character.
Yes, so
which comes into play later.
Much
in
later,
the series.
But you don't really notice it at first. But she definitely is.
She rubs you the wrong way for sure.
Oh,
from the start.
Oh yeah,
she's very passive aggressive. You know, she's always my child.
She's the woman that
passive aggressive.
That you rub your feet.
She's a Karen.
Oh yeah. Oh dude,
she's the K word, and
she even has the hair of it too.
Oh god.
like it's almost like an old school hair of the Karen. But. But anyways, Kai Wen essentially is very much like you said. She's a nicer version, for lack of better words, of Gul Dukat, which comes out much later on because, again, we'll get into that later. But essentially, imagine a Gul Dukat, but a very strong religious figure in the Bajoran religion, and that's Kai Wen. And she is not the best character. I mean, she's not the nicest character you'll ever meet. She's very underhanding. She, again, very similarly to Dukat, very manipulative. She wants things done her way or the highway. And if she feels that it's not in the right method for the prophets, in her eye of the prophets, she'll turn you away and tell you to go.
She'll
find
also
the
assassinate you or attempt to assassinate you.
Exactly.
And that's like one of the first episodes with her. So that's how they start her off with an assassination attempt. You know,
and that already gives you the preface that she's not one woman to be trusted. So continuing on with our villains in the series, we have Gul Dukat, which is a mastermind. I love him to death, but God, he's an asshole. We have Kai Wen, and who's also just a manipulative figure for the Bajorans, who they really don't need this kind of thing, you know, especially when it's a character that they look up to in their daily lives. You know, also being this kind of.
She's also very anti Federation, so that comes into play with, you know, Cisco trying to bridge the gap between Bajor and the Federation, trying to get the Federation or get Bajor into the Federation. You got Kai Wen, the religious figurehead, fighting against the prophet.
Correct.
Which is crazy. And when you think about it.
It's
almost like the split of the Catholic Church. Just kidding. That's for the other podcast.
No, and that's really interesting to note too, because I mean we start off the series knowing that Cisco is the emissary of the prophets. Mm-hmm. You know, he is the one to deliver all the messages and bring Bajor into this new era of the Golden Age, so to speak. And Kai Wen consistently battles against Cisco, saying, "You're not Bajoran. Why should
you don't believe in the prophets?" Which
exactly.
He doesn't.
Exactly.
So she's right in that way, but
she continuously battles him, and it's really funny because as much as she battles him, as much as she is the essential pope of the Bajoran religion, all the Bajoran people look at Cisco as, yes, he is our emissary because he has had visions with the prophets. He's spoken to them, while Kai Wen has never in her life ever had the prophets ever come to her and be like, "Hey, big dog, this is what you got to do." No. They come to Ben, Big Dog Cisco, Big Dog Lafayette Cisco, and tell him, "Hey, man, look, we've got this stuff for you to do, and you got to do it whether you like it or not." While Kai Wen is just kind of sitting back on the sidelines. She's essentially just a bench warmer.
She's jealous, and that comes into play. She's like a lot of her character development is based on her jealousy of Cisco. I mean, it's not necessarily apparent when you first meet her, but as you dive more into her character, it's just like she so desperately wants to be in the Prophet's favor, but she is not getting what Cisco has gotten, and Cisco doesn't even want what he's got. She feels that he's like almost like she thinks he's undeserving for one thing, but also like how dare this person get the will of the Prophet? Yeah, and I get nothing. I've dedicated my life to serving you. Why am I not getting anything?
Exactly. Fuck, I forgot what I was going to say.
That's okay.
But that's Kai Wen in a nutshell. And she's another, right next to Dukat, one of the strongest villains in the series.
There are a lot of great villains in Deep Space Nine, which is another good thing. It's not just one. For next gen.
We had Q.
And Q is fucking great.
God, have I shown you the plate that I got that has Q on it?
I've not seen this Q plate.
Dude, I have to show you this Q plate. Oh my god. So he's in his
We'll post pics of this Q plate.
Oh, definitely. He's in his gown where he's the judge.
Oh,
in that red gown with the black cap.
Yeah.
Oh my god, it's so cool. but anyways, there's a lot of villains in Deep Space Nine. These two are definitely some of the prevalent ones, Gul Dukat and Kai Wen, throughout the entirety of the series. But let's dip into the other big players.
The Dominion.
Now, the Dominion actually had to bring forth one of my favorite Star Trek characters ever. And I love this guy.
Oh,
I love him to death.
I think I know who you're talking about.
And we've had this conversation before where, you've asked me if I was to choose a species, Star Trek history, Star Trek lore, what would I be? And I've told you before, time and time again. Well, I think I might be Vulcan, but honestly, at the end of the day, I know, kapla, I'm a Klingon, and what I really love is once the Dominion started coming into factor in the series, we actually were brought back with the Klingons, so we got to see Gowron again, which was really nice. I never really liked him as a character, but it was nice to see him again.
I liked his eyes. He's got nice eyes.
He does have really nice eyes. He just kind of looks at you like he's about to take your love and heart away. But then we got my favorite Klingon of all, which was Worf, son of Moog, played by Michael Dorn. God, I love Worf. Yeah. God.
Welcome back.
And I think you mentioned earlier, I think he's the only Star Trek character to have gotten this much coverage.
Mm-hmm.
He had all that time in Next Gen, and then he actually got 3 additional seasons in Deep Space Nine. He deserved it. I mean, the guy went through so much in his life. I mean, from the Battle of Kittimer, and then going to having to deal with the Borg, and then now coming into Deep Space Nine and the war with the Dominion, he needed some screen time. But before we get into Dominion, let's talk about Worf for a second.
Yeah, we didn't talk about him. It's crazy. Well, we were talking earlier about all the main characters. I didn't really even think about Worf.
Well, see, it kind of makes sense because he doesn't come in till the end of season 3. So we already have 3 seasons of Bashir, Odo, Quark, Kira, Jadzia Dax, and Benjamin Sisko. And we say Jadzia Dax for a reason because we'll get into that a little bit later. Actually, there's another character we forgot to mention too, which is a huge player. Before we get into Worf, we need to mention another favorite character of mine. Mr. Garrick.
Oh, shit. I can't believe we didn't even talk about Garrick.
Mr. Garrick, just a little bit of backstory. He was part of what's called the Obsidian Order for the Cardassian government, which essentially is like the
CIA,
Seagulls, whatever you want.
SS, whatever you want to make it.
Whatever you want to compare it to modern times. And Mr. Garrick was exiled from Cardassia for unknown reasons. You
can make out your own decision when you watch the show because it's blurred.
It's blurred in a lot of times, but he was exiled over to Terok Nor, Deep Space Nine, and he lives there as a tailor. Now, when you first meet Mr. Garrick, it is immediately mentioned by Benjamin Sisko. Oh, he's a snake in the grass. Why should I ever trust him? He's just a liar. He works for the Cardassian government. Why should I ever trust him? No, well, the fact of the matter is that while he does have connections to the Cardassian government and many other people in the Alpha Quadrant, his whole entire interest is for himself.
Mm-hmm.
And for a certain person, which
his
is...
lover? His wish.
It ends up becoming his lover later on, which is very important, and also his own father.
Oh, I was talking about Mr. Bashir.
Bashir is his ultimate lover. I mean, sometimes I think about it. Who's a better friend of Bashir? Is it O'Brien or Garrick? Because they're both pretty close.
Garrick gives him better advice, but O'Brien gives him more love.
The bromance.
Yeah.
Now, the reason why I have to mention Garrick before we get into Worf is because I mentioned this to you a couple weeks ago. There's an episode between Garrick and Bashir where Garrick gives Bashir a book. And the book is about how the Klingons are in a war with Cardassia. And the episode ends with Bashir asking Garrick, well, who wins? And Garrick says, well, who do you think? Now, this happens very early in the series. Now, season 3 at the very end, you start to realize that the Klingons are now about to go to war with Cardassia. So this was a really important foreshadowing coming onto the future, but this also leads us right into Worf, son of Moog, because he ends up being on Deep Space Nine during this time with this war going on, and he is now back at the same confliction that he's had in Next Generation. Who is he going to side with? Starfleet? Or the Klingon Empire? And sure enough, he decides to go back to Starfleet and say, no, this is not honorable. There is no honor in fighting the Cardassian Empire with what's going on. So again, Worf looks to be exiled from his own people and decides to leave Starfleet. But then, at the end of this whole interaction, he goes to Sisko and says, I don't want to leave Starfleet, but I don't know where to go. Maybe I can go on this other ship. And Sisko says, no, I have a different plan for you if you want to remain in Starfleet. So he gives him the command of tactical operations, which is very similar
to what bread and butter.
Exactly. His bread and butter, that what he had on the Enterprise and Next Generation. So this is just home to him. And I'm just going to say, seeing Worf again was very nice. I love Worf because throughout all the Klingons that we've seen so far, there has not been one so honorable as Worf. They're also slimy. They try to find their way around things. Like Lursa and B'Etor, like Gowron, like, what is his name? The other one that tries to take command, the Next Generation. I'm going to fact check it right now.
Are you talking about the one that framed him?
Yes.
I'm blanking on it too.
That's okay.
But
I'm going to find out right now.
You mentioned, while you look it up, you mentioned the question of like loyalty. Does Worf go with the Federation or does he go with the Klingons?
Yes.
That's true for Odo too. You know, throughout the series, you know, am I solid or am I a changeling? Who should I side with? My race, or should I side with
my heart?
With my heart, basically.
And I just found the name, and it was Duras. It was the house of Duras that actually framed Worf's family at the Battle of Kittimer over in the Next Generation. When they mentioned that,
you like how deep this lore goes? It goes even deeper. We're scratching the surface.
Wait, so we're just letting you know what's going on. There's so much more going on here, especially when it comes to Worf's family. God, so good. but no, you make a really good point because Worf is struggling again for the second time.
Do Kira too? Bajor Federation.
Yep. Do I follow my heart or do I follow my people? You know, and Odo. Do I follow where I've always wanted to find home? Or do I stick with what's familiar to me? But what's familiar is also home, in the case of Odo. And for Kira, do I stick with what's home with what I've fought for my entire life? You know, sticking with, Bajor fighting against the Cardassians, now essentially trying to find some type of battle with the Federation and Starfleet. And then if we want to drive even further, Sisko.
Yeah.
His desire to want to understand the prophets, the wormhole aliens, and going into this next part of his life, or sticking with his guns, what he's been taught is, his entire adult life of being with the Federation, which we see countless times, which goes into our next big villain, the Dominion.
So let's talk about the best villain faction in all of Star Trek, the Dominion.
Which are led by the Founders.
The Founders. Jeez, who could the Founders be? So what's great, we were talking about this earlier, is that in season 2, I think, there's an episode where Quark gets an assignment from the Grand Nagus, which is like the head of the Ferengi Society, or head of commerce at least.
And he talks like this.
Give me your foreskin. So he sends him on this mission to the Gamma Quadrant to get something stupid, like wine or something, just to set up like an outpost. And in this, while he's doing this, they find out this very warlike society is afraid of this thing called the Dominion. And it's the first time we hear about the Dominion. And it's just a name drop.
It is just a name drop at that time.
It's literally just the Dominion. And I think the episode ends with just like, what's the Dominion? Okay.
And before we go into a little bit more in depth of the Dominion, I have to bring up this Ferengi law of acquisition.
Oh, let's hear it.
Rule of acquisition number 7. Keep your ears open.
They got big ears, though.
They have big ears. And you know what else they have? Big lobes.
You want a lobe job right now?
I would like a little bit of Umox right now.
Oh, God.
Now, Umox is the, I would say, the similarity between getting a pedicure, but for your ears.
So it's a hand job.
Yes.
But for your job.
But specifically for your earlobes. I can go for a little bit of Umox right now.
So we have set up a OnlyFans page that you can send your money.
Post the lobes. But
hey, would you like a lobe pick?
but yes, we have this first name drop of the Dominion with the Ferengis, which is really interesting because before this point they were just kind of seen as, this profit grinding, species. For them to have to go out into the Gamma Quadrant past the wormhole and have to deal with this new species, it really brought a different player to the table, but not for another season later.
Yeah, and it's as far as next gen goes, I'd say a lot of times it really dropped the ball when it came to introducing new villains. The Borg, it did well, I'd say, yeah. Mm-hmm. But like there were like there was just one episode that always stuck out in my mind where there's this big conspiracy in Starfleet in next gen, and like Picard meets with all these other captains. There's something strange going on with Starfleet Command. It seems really weird.
Oh, yeah. I know which one you're talking about, where they end up being some type of alien race.
Yeah, and like they blow up this dude's head and he turns into hamburger meat, and it's like this gross little bug thing.
The hamburger helper that you buy at the grocery store, right?
Yeah.
Damn, I ate that
it
for
looks,
so many
It
years.
looks like McDonald's meat before they make it into meat. But yeah, the episode ends with like them saying like before he died, they sent like a transmission to like this weird area of space, and then it's never talked about again. Never brought up. No one cares.
Potentially
nothing happens.
Maybe. I haven't seen Voyager yet, so I can't make full speculation. We'll have to do a whole theory episode.
Oh, we'll do some theory. But what I really, that long tangent is just, I really enjoyed that, they did a good job of setting up this main, and it's not just one person, it's a force. It's like the Romulans. But they're stronger than the Romulans. The Romulans are afraid of the Dominion. The Klingons are afraid of the Dominion. And it's just, it's really cool.
And, you come to find out that the Dominion is encompassed of 2 different species, which are both manufactured, which is what really got me. Now, the 2 species that are manufactured, one of them is called the Vorta, which are literally just all clones.
Brings up my favorite guest character in all of Star Trek. Weyoun. I just watched Reanimator, main character in Reanimator, 1, 2, and 3. Jeffrey Combs, my boy.
God,
he's amazing. He's also in Enterprise.
I as I was watching it, I liked Weyoun 5. So the reason why I say Weyoun 5 is as they find that the Vorta, by their dominant name in this one specifically, Weyoun, is what's the word I'm looking for? They're not worthy anymore. There's a specific word I'm looking for. They should be deactivated. There's a word I'm looking for. It'll come to me later. But essentially, once they find that the previous one is not worthy, they just create another one and they kill that primary one. So they keep going down the line. Weyoun 5 is my favorite. defective. There we go. So once they find that they're defective, they just make a new one. They clone a new one. So that's the Vorta. Now the next species is called the Jem'Hadar, which they are literally just a beefed up version of the Klingons, except they have no honor.
They just like to fight and kill, and they're addicted to space heroin.
Yep, that's exactly it.
And guess who has all the space heroin?
The Dominion. Now, who rules the Dominion? It's ruled by a species we told you earlier, the Changelings, Odo's original family.
That's a great reveal.
I'm not going to lie. When I found that out, I threw my hat on the floor.
You were like, what?
I yelled so loud, I paused it, and I went outside, and I think I had like 3 chain smokes. I was like, dude, this is insane. This is not what I expected at all.
And it's great because Odo finds them in the first part. He's like, oh my god, I found my race. And then in the second part, he finds out that they are totally fucking evil. Yep. And he's just like, oh, shit.
And the thing that was funny about that is that when he finds them, they appear to him and Kira that, oh, we're just this innocent race, dude. We don't do anything wrong. And then the next part of
they're just like, we're part of the Great Link. We're part of a commune.
Exactly. Like we're all one big happy family.
We're in a big pool of
we're in a big pool of goo. And then the next thing you know, oh, actually, we're the founders of the Dominion. The Dominion looks at us as gods because we created these 2 species. So they have to look at us like gods. Now, this was the turning point for me for Odo. And again, like we mentioned with Worf, Odo, you can join us and be part of the Great Link and be with us forever and be a god. Or are you going to go back to the solids and just live
Which
your life?
they consider solids an inferior race, so they're basically like, are you inferior, or are you part of us?
And to go along with that, the whole premise of them creating this Dominion was that for hundreds of years, the changelings, the shapeshifters, were scolded as clown gestures. Oh, just do this for us, just do that for us. They looked as
yet another broken
character in the series, that ended up going the opposite direction as our main cast has gone. Instead of making a family, they made a destructive organization, which I'll let you play your mind with your real life tangencies towards it. But, you have this, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of it. But you have this, okay, I found it, just juxtaposition of these characters that find their way home, these characters that made all this destruction from one part of the universe literally to the other side of the universe. Now, along with that, the Changelings sent out, what is it, over 100?
Yeah, but quite a few.
So they sent out a certain amount of infant shapeshifters, changelings, through different parts of the galaxy.
Odo included.
For them to explore what was going on and have their own ideas of what they feel about their immediate surroundings, and then return back to the Great Link with their findings.
They're almost like, in Odo's case, it turned out good for Odo because he grew to become attached to the solids. But I feel like the changelings they basically sent out spies.
Exactly.
Almost, and they almost like wanted all these new individuals in the Great Link to hate the environment that they grow up in, essentially, and then come back and be like, oh, thank God I'm back in the Great Link. I hate all these people.
At the end.
Yeah, and guess who got theirs?
So that's the other big villain in this entire series. So we have Gul Dukat, we have Kai Wen, we have the Dominion, which is ruled by the Founders, which is just nothing more than a group of shapeshifters, battling out against control for both quadrants. Now we have the Alpha Quadrant, where we started our adventure in, going through the wormhole through the Celestial Temple over to the Gamma Quadrant, which would take hundreds of years to get over. And now we have this battle of, okay, who's in control now? Now, the main reason why we have this battle is because the Founders believe that since they are changelings, they are superior over to any of the solids, so to speak, anything that cannot change form.
And just like Dukat, they're also trying to bring quote-unquote order to chaos, which is, that's always a good code word for when people want to do something really horrible, is they're bringing order to something.
Oh, of course.
So, you can either agree to their terms peacefully, or if you say no to the founders, to the Dominion,
you better get
then
ready to sit in your grave.
yeah, you better have a force.
Now, between all of this that happens, it's a lot of really great stuff. You see a lot of really great development between all the characters over on Deep Space Nine, and then you even see some development over on the villain side as well, specifically with Kai Wynn and Gul Dukat.
Mm-hmm.
There's a turning point in the series. I want to say it's season 5, the one we watched earlier.
Mm-hmm.
In the middle of it, towards the end of it, where the Dominion actually takes back space. Well, before I go into that, where Cardassia forms a non-aggression treaty with the Dominion.
They basically become Dominion slaves.
Exactly. And who was the head of the Cardassia at that time? Gul Dukat.
Oh, yeah.
The good old bad boy himself. Now, the interesting thing is that he failed to see what could potentially happen at this attack on Deep Space Nine, which is the death of his daughter by his right-hand man, which then led to him having an emotional breakdown, literally losing himself as a character and as an entire person as a whole. And I'm going to be honest with you, Brendan, when I saw that happen, I was really sad. I felt really bad for him.
It's crazy because what I always found interesting is, so Gul Dukat has a bunch of offspring, right?
Correct.
Because in a previous episode, when he works with Cisco, he talks about how he's missing his son's birthday.
Correct.
And that he's just like, oh, I'm sorry that you're missing your son's birthday, blah, blah. And then you think it's going to be this really heartfelt moment where Cisco talks about having to miss one of Jake's birthdays or something like that. And then Dukat is just like, all my son is going to remember is that a Federation starship took me away from him during his birthday, and that's sad. It's just like, God damn, Dukat, what the fuck?
Again, that's when Dukat is just,
he's in it for Dukat, and it's crazy that I always found it. Sorry, it's not crazy. I always found it interesting that he cared so much about his daughter, as opposed to, you never hear about his sons. It's just his daughter, his half Bajoran daughter.
There we go. Yeah. So the daughter that we're speaking of is actually essentially it's from his mistress. Mm-hmm. That he never spoke about to his actual family, where he had 4 or 5 sons and I guess a daughter or 2 in there.
Yeah.
But this one daughter, Zial, he finds that nothing can go wrong as long as he has her. Now, at this turning point in the series, again, which is about season 5 into 6, she ends up dying by the right hand of his side, which is called, again, another one of my favorite characters in the series.
Damar.
Good
with his
old Damar.
His addiction. What's he addicted to? What's the beverage?
Oh, Kanar.
Kanar. Fuck yeah.
Which is,
I need some Kanar in me right now.
it's hey, look, we're not sponsored by Crown Royal, but we're sponsored by Kanar Royal. But
like Kanar label. Johnny Kanar.
Hey, Johnny Kanar. But when his right hand man ends up shooting his daughter on accident, you see Dukat go through this transformation, and you really think
he loses the one thing he really cares about.
Yep.
Because throughout the series, you think that he cares about Cardassia, and I'm sure part of him does, but he doesn't really care about Cardassia as much as he cares about his power.
Yeah, no,
just his standing.
He
loses his one emotional attachment to the world, I think,
which is power.
Yeah,
which is, now I'm thinking about this. This just came up in my mind. Dukat doesn't care about anything except for power.
Mm-hmm.
Now he is the ultimate, in retrospect, looking at it, the whole series, Deep Space Nine as a whole. He just wants power.
Mm-hmm.
Now, who is the only character that's given all the power in the quadrant? That's Cisco. He didn't even want it. Now, I can see
it drops into his lap.
Exactly. Now, I can see
perfect foil.
Now, I can see how this whole battle between the two of them has consistently been going on as I look at the series, because Dukat, all he wants is to have this power over anybody that's around him, and Cisco is he's just a guy, man.
He's just a guy. You get drops into the situation, and then he doesn't abuse his power. He just
learns to live with it. He just tries to accept it for what it is, and he tries to understand it. Versus Dukat that's just like, I need more. I need to find out everything. I need to find out the lore. I need to find out all of it. But he goes about it all the wrong way. While being a very fascist, very aggravating and dominant goal for Cardassia, and then also going into what we'll talk about later, a very just strong person for the Pa Wraith, which is essentially, we mentioned it before, the anti-prophets for the
basically
Bajoran
evil
religion.
Spirits, if you want to dumb it. Yeah,
Yep.
They're the evil spirits.
They're the evil spirits.
Evil alien spirits.
They're the evil wormhole spirits.
So these evil wormhole spirits live in a cave.
But let's get into Damar for a little bit.
You'll have to, because as I've been rewatching, I found that I remember very little about Damar except that he was he's like basically given Dukat's spot, right?
Yes, because Dukat. So when that battle happens and Dukat loses
his spot
daughter,
within like the Dominion and
correct.
Cardassia.
Yeah. So when Dukat loses his daughter, he lets himself be captured by the Federation, and he essentially is just losing his mind. Damar returns back with the Dominion after the long battle at Deep Space Nine, and he then takes Gul Dukat's spot. He then becomes Gul Damar, and he goes through a very strong, very depressive state, of I didn't want this power, and now he's living with this regret that he killed essentially his, I don't want to say best friend, but the person he looked up to, his daughter, and now
Almost like his mentor.
Yeah,
I'd say,
and he has to live with that regret, and it's a tough thing because you see him slowly start taking the bottle down as he starts taking roll, and then towards the end of his time while he's taking roll, you see him heavily take the bottle down even more, where Wayun, Jeffrey Combs, is like, oh wow, how much did you drink today already?
He basically be like he gets Gul Dukat's spot, but he's basically, I mean, like Dukat was also a pawn for the Dominion, but Damar is even more of a pawn because he just loses more and more will to basically go throughout his day to day. He's just basically there as like the Dominion puppet at that point. There's nothing. There's no one fighting against the Dominion. He's just like, okay.
He's literally there just to show face that, hey, you know what? Cardassia said that we can use your planet, we can use anything that you have. Damar says it's okay since Dukat isn't here. Which, I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you, man. Once I started seeing that happen, I felt really bad for the guy because he didn't ask for all that, and I want to say if Dukat was in his place, he probably would have fought for it because he was already giving Wayun a problem.
It's really interesting because on my rewatch,
at least Dukat had the honor of the Cardassians.
Yeah, when you see it in the earlier seasons, because on the rewatch that I'm doing right now, I just got done with an episode where Thomas Riker's clone. Don't worry about it. You'll figure it out.
If you watch Next Gen, you know what we're talking about.
Anyway, Thomas Riker's clone steals a ship and goes to go fight the Dominion, basically. And through that, a bunch of stuff happens. But Dukat, he's basically one of the head military members. He finds out that the secret police is basically building a fleet of ships.
Actually, the secret police is what we mentioned earlier.
Obsidian Order.
The Obsidian Order, which is...
And they're technically, according to Cardassian law, they're not supposed to have a fleet.
And they're not even real.
Yeah, they also don't exist, apparently. But that's the first time Dukat almost gets taken aback that
there's something else going on.
There might be some civil
that
distress.
He can't control. So I think that's why he took it into his own hands. That, hey, you know what? If you have the Obsidian Order,
you can see that Dukat is visibly distressed about the Obsidian Order getting a fleet, because I truly believe even though Dukat cares about power, he does care about Cardassia.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, and just like
Definitely.
Sisko cares about the Federation and Bajor.
And that's why they are such a great contrast.
And when they get paired together, especially in that episode, they really bounce off of each other because they got a lot of stuff they relate with.
Oh yeah,
but then they also have so many things that just.
But then at the end of the day, like, you can relate so much to an individual. Okay, hold on. We're gonna take it off a tangent now. You can relate so much to somebody, anybody in your life, but there's always gonna be something that might make you differ from them, and that's in this situation. We have Cisco, who's doing it for the purity of his heart. I want to understand things, right? And, you know, and doing it for the Federation. And then we have Dukat, who wants to understand things, but because he wants the power for it. He wants to be able to hold you under his nail and say, no, this is what I want you to do, versus Cisco saying, no, this is what we have to do. And I think now, again, retrospectively looking towards the series as we're discussing it, that's why they are such a great matchmaker, because they are consistently battling each other out in a boxing match, and it's like, how many rounds are you going to go before we both realize we're both fighting for the same thing, but for different ends of the spectrum? This is it's the textbook definition of duality. Cisco, Dukat. God, I love Star Trek. It's so fucking good.
I'd like to see a good Venn diagram with Cisco and Dukat.
Yes.
I think that'd be a pretty good thing to see. But
for another short episode,
going off what you said, Dukat uses information about his world for power.
Correct.
And then Cisco uses information, but he uses information for exploration, which is the basis of Star Trek. Exactly. So that's why I always take issue with people who don't like Deep Space Nine, because it takes place on a space station, because Star Trek is about exploration, and just because they're stuck on a space station, which they aren't.
How does the line go? The way the series starts?
These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise, its continuing mission to explore strange new worlds, seek out new life forms. All right, well, go where nobody has gone before.
The most important one is to go where nobody has gone before.
Trust us. We're big Star Trek fans, but the recall is not flowing.
It's been a long night. Sponsored by, non-sponsored, but sponsored by Johnny Walker. And
also,
Brown.
In our defense, all the stuff we've been watching does not have that intro. It has the intro we used for this podcast, which is one of my favorites. I'm partial to Enterprise. You can forward your hate mail to me on that theme song.
But
I got faith of the heart. No one's gonna bend or break me. Adam has not seen Enterprise yet. He's in for a treat when he listens to that intro. The best intro of all Star Trek.
I'm gonna start Voyager soon. Voyager is coming up soon, and then I'll get into Enterprise. You gotta take it one step at a time.
Faith to believe.
If it's gonna be a Rick Astley song, I'm not ready for it.
It's kind of like Christian rock, but set to like very.
No offense to those who like Christian rock, but
all offense to those who love Christian rock. But "Faith of the Heart" is the best Christian rock song, and it isn't even Christian. Forward your hate mail to Ripper Dog BB.
But going back, the more we're talking about this, the more I really realize that Dukat and Cisco were drawn out to be polar opposites. And I think that's why.
But relatable enough where,
right?
You still believe in one universe that somewhere, some way, they could be friends if some of them have made different decisions. I'd say.
It's like you said earlier. There are episodes in the entire series. Well, I want to say up till about season 5 or 6. There are episodes where you have interactions between Cisco and Dukat where they look like they're buddies. They look like they can tackle anything that comes at them. And I think
like they're about to play baseball or something.
Exactly. They might even be the best friends in the world, but when you look back at it, there's a specific episode, I want to say it's in season 5, or maybe no, it's definitely season 5, where Cisco acknowledges that Gul Dukat is the embodiment of pure evil. That he has lived his whole life knowing, and we talked about this earlier, that he lived his whole life knowing that, yeah, maybe some people just kind of go the wrong way. Maybe things just kind of happen. But he never really thought that there was a good and evil.
Benjamin? I've notified Starfleet, Dukat's last known position. They'll find him.
No, they won't. You know, old man, sometimes life seems so complicated. Nothing is truly good or truly evil. Everything seems to be a shade of gray. And then you spend some time with a man like Dukat, and you realize that there is such a thing as truly evil.
To realize that is one thing. To do something about it is another. So what are you going to do?
I'll tell you what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to let him destroy Bajor. I fear no evil. From now on, it's him or me.
And that's where Cisco understands that there's pure evil in the world, in the Alpha Quadrant, in the Gamma Quadrant, in all of the universe. But there's an exceptional thing to note that many episodes later, Cisco has to do exactly what he didn't want to do.
He breaches into that gray zone, and some may consider it evil.
But some,
I mean, is it a necessary evil? I mean, that's not for me or you to decide. It's up to all y'all to decide.
It's up to the folks that are over here listening at home. In my opinion, it's a very hard form of character to accept. It's a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, because you got Cisco, who, he's done some dark things. He poisoned a planet. We didn't talk about that, but he poisoned a planet to keep it out of the hands of the Maquis. But he never really resorted to murder.
See, well,
right? But he doesn't do the murder. But is it murder?
See, that's the thing I love about Cisco, is that as opposed to Picard and Kirk, who have their upstanding view of the Federation laws and what they want to do in the Prime Directive, Cisco has always viewed this entire series of Deep Space Nine that I need to do what I have to do in order to keep the peace, in order to keep things from going into awry. And it's in this scene where he speaks of Gul Dukat that you can see the comparison between both of them. That you see this emissary of the Prophet in one hand for the Bajorans, and then you see this ultimate evil that is Gul Dukat, Legate Dukat, speaker of the power raids, anti of the Bajoran prophets, that they almost combine into one person. And that's why I feel that it is so important to note that no matter how much you look at Deep Space Nine, there is the mirror effect. There is a duality effect of you have Benjamin Lafayette Cisco as the ultimate good versus Gul Legate Dukat as the ultimate evil. With the inner counterparts in between of the Dominion of Kai Wen, of all these different moving chess pieces that are coming across, that it's so important. This episode is so important because and also the additional episode of Pale in the Moonlight, where Cisco goes to Garrick for help to destroy, essentially, not knowingly, destroy a Romulan senator to help bring the Romulans into the war. That way the Federation, the Klingons, now have the Romulans up against the Dominion and put them with their backs against the wall, that they cannot win the war. And I feel that is where the true markings of human causality really meet its own ends.
You know, Cisco, in that clip we just listened to, Cisco states that he thinks that there's a gray area between good and evil. And in this next scene, he really treads on the side of, depending on how you feel about it, he really treads in dark waters. I would say it's really basically what Cisco does is, I mean, he enlists Garrett into his help. He doesn't necessarily order Garrett to do these things, but it's a very Cardassian of Cisco to do these things.
Exactly. Which it kind of brings you full circle. You know, we started this whole series with Cardassians doing very undermined things. And for Benjamin Sisko and now a captain of the Starfleet
Captain Sisko now.
You know, of the Starfleet Federation, to have to admit to wanting to do all of these things that are handedly, and to go to a Cardassian, an exiled Cardassian, Garrick, from the Obsidian Order, to help him in these, you know, in his mission. Garrick makes the perfect point. Why would you ask anybody else but me to do this for you when you know I can do the things that you cannot? Because you do not want to get your hands dirty. You want to stay in the gray area. You don't want to be in the blue or the red. You don't want to be in any of that area. You want to stay where you're at. And that is the prime example, like you said, of acting like, not to be racist to Star Trek folks,
specious, but
to be like a Cardassian.
And all it took was the self-respect of one Starfleet officer.
After telling me in no uncertain terms that he would expose this vile deception to the entire Alpha Quadrant, he got back in his shuttle and headed home. There didn't seem to be anything more to do. So I went back to work. 2 days later, I got the news.
No one for me today.
I had one. Maria Tatalia, wounded in action.
Friend?
Friend of a friend. I actually only met her once. I don't think she'd remember me.
Friend of a friend between the two of us. Well, I know it sounds a bit strange, but I'd say we're off to a pretty good start today.
Captain, we just received word from Starfleet Intelligence that a Romulan shuttlecraft carrying a high-ranking senator has just been destroyed.
Which senator?
Senator Vreenak. He was returning to Romulus from a diplomatic mission to Sakara when his shuttle exploded. The Tal Shiar are investigating, but preliminary reports point to sabotage. They believe that the Dominion is responsible.
The Dominion assassinated a Romulan senator.
On a diplomatic mission.
That changes everything. It could even bring the Romulans into the war.
Excuse me.
You killed him.
That's right.
That's what you planned to do all along, isn't it? You knew the data rod wouldn't hold up to scrutiny. You just wanted to get him on the station so that you could plant a bomb on his shuttle.
It wasn't quite that simple. I did have hopes that the rod would somehow pass inspection, but I suspected that Tolar may not have been up to the task.
And what about Tolar? Did you kill him too?
Think of them both as tragic victims of war. If you can allow your anger to subside for a moment, you'll see that they did not die in vain. The Romulans will enter the war.
There's no guarantee of that.
Oh, but I think that there is. You see, when the Tal Shiar finishes examining the wreckage of Reenak's shuttle, they'll find the burnt remnants of a Cardassian optolithic data rod which somehow miraculously survived the explosion. After painstaking forensic examination, they'll discover that the rod contains a recording of a high-level Dominion meeting at which the invasion of Romulus was being planned.
And then they'll discover that it is a fraud.
Oh, I don't think they will. Because any imperfections in the forgery will appear to be a result of the explosion. So, with a seemingly legitimate rod in one hand and a dead senator in the other, I ask you, Captain, What conclusion would you draw?
That Vreenak obtained the rod on Sukata, and that the Dominion killed him to prevent him from returning to Romulus with it.
Precisely. And the more the Dominion protests its innocence, the more the Romulans will believe they're guilty, because it's exactly what the Romulans would have done in their place. That's why you came to me. Isn't it, Captain? Because you knew I could do those things that you weren't capable of doing. Well, it worked. And you'll get what you want. A war between the Romulans and the Dominion. And if your conscience is bothering you, you should soothe it with the knowledge that you may have just saved the entire Alpha Quadrant, and all it cost was the life of one Romulan senator, one criminal, and the self-respect of one Starfleet officer. I don't know about you, but I'd call that a bargain.
God, I love Garrick because he gives it to you straight, and he knew exactly what was going on in that moment. And that's exactly the dynamic that I wanted to point out between Sisko and Dukat, because they are the strongest pillars of the entire series of DS9, of one being of ultimate good, the other being ultimate evil. But how many times will either of them walk in that gray area that we spoke of?
Yeah, it's, just doing this podcast, I never really thought about it in very, binary terms, where it's just if you have, Dukat on one side and you have Sisko on the other.
Right.
Just, what they do. Obviously, both of them go off in different directions, but they often, how often do they intersect? Sisko, in this episode, Sisko basically signs off on the murder of a Romulan senator, a criminal, and according to Garrick, his self-respect.
But then you're justifying the death of one man to end up having help in an entire war against an entire species. Where does the line
where do you draw the line? Because Dukat, I'm sure Dukat probably thought he was preventing a war at some point.
Yeah, of course.
I'm doing this benevolently.
Exactly.
Sisko's doing
not
it
even
benevolently.
Right. Not even before the Federation came in here. But I'm sure Dukat has drawn this line many times before. But for us to see Benjamin Sisko draw this line, I mean, you see this figure that is, up until this point being the emissary of the prophets, this holier than thou kind of figure, all of a sudden saying, no, we're justifying the death of this one man. And not only justifying the death, but also plotting this entire scheme of his death to ensure that we get the aid of their species for this war against the Dominion. Where does that say it's okay in Starfleet regulation? And that's why it's important to note that in this episode, in the Pale Moonlight, he says this is off the record. Because he knows.
Oh yeah, in the very beginning.
Yeah,
because it's a
captain's personal log, and he knows.
He knows he deletes the record at the end. If he says
exactly,
computer,
he has to get it. He has to get out of his system at the end. He goes, computer, delete that whole record, because he knows Garrick was right. He knows that is the reason why he went to Garrick for assistance.
He just had to say it out, and then it's nuts. Can you imagine a more human moment in all of Star Trek?
But you know what gets me? That's even more human than that. You know what really got me in this episode? Is at the end, where he asks himself the hypothetical question:
would I do it again?
Would I do it again? And his response: yes. That's the most.
You feel it.
That's what got me, because like you said, I can feel it. I get it. You are facing hundreds of years of desperation against the Dominion because of
total war,
because of the analytics that the genetically engineered humans got. And he said, "No, you know what? I'll take it."
Yeah, people are dying every day.
If because he was tired of seeing the causality reports, and for him to justify one death as opposed to millions of others continuously every single week, and then him to say, "Yeah, you know what? I'll take it." That's what made me realize, as much as I love the goodness in his heart, he is nothing more than just a mirror of Dukat. And I feel that while watching Deep Space Nine, you have to keep note that Dukat and Sisko are polar opposites, but they're also the same character. Only for they do what they have to do for what they feel is right. Dukat does what he feels was right for Cardassia for a good amount of time, but then he acts on revenge, obviously, as we note much later on. Sisko does what he feels is right for the Federation, but then he grows to realize that, no, I have to do it for myself. I have to do it for Bajor. I have to do it because I am the emissary of the prophets. And noting those two similarities, I feel, is a very important piece in understanding the culture of Sisko and Dukat in Deep Space Nine.
Would you say that Sisko almost... I mean, would you say, just because I'm thinking about it, would you say that Sisko almost eventually gives himself a cult of personality like Dukat does?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes. And the main reason why is because for the longest time, while he is supposed emissary of the prophets for the Bajoran people, he has always fighting against it. He goes, I don't want to do anything with it. I'm a Starfleet officer. But after a certain point in the series, where you see the Bajoran people go up to him, oh, I'm about to marry my wife. Oh, I'm about to have a child. Oh, this, and that with my children. Emissary, would you be there for us to bless us? Oh, yes.
No.
Yes, of course. I will be there. And it's when he starts saying yes, that's when I realize you are acting in the same manner of Dukat because your intentions are gold, but you don't know what the consequence is afterwards. And that's why I feel it's been so important for us to discuss Dukat and Sisko, because they are, again...
They're the centerpieces of this series,
exactly.
Really. Exactly. You know, Dukat isn't in every episode. Sisko is basically in every episode, but the through line throughout it is like, you know, you have all, you know, you have the Dominion, you have all this stuff, and but it always comes down to Sisko and Dukat.
Yep. And you know, let's go ahead and fast forward to the end of the series. You know, it's been a long time coming since we've started this episode. It's been a great time for me. You know, we're gonna have to keep doing these short leaf episodes for sure. But you know, let's go right into the bread and butter. You know, we've been talking about it for a while, and the last few moments of the end of the season is with Sisko and Dukat. You know, in the fire caves over on Bajor, which the fire caves are what hold the Pa-Wraiths, the anti-prophets of the Bajoran religion. And it takes Sisko to sacrifice himself to seal Dukat with the Pa-Wraiths for him to join the prophets and fulfill his role. Like we've been talking about, that's the end goal. They were two, in my mind, they were two individuals that were destined to be with their own kind at the end of the game. For Sisko, it was to be with the prophets in the Celestial Temple right outside Deep Space Nine in the wormhole. For Dukat, it was to be bound in the book of the Pa-Wraiths in the fire caves. That he essentially guided Kai Wen over to do that same deal. And that's really what gets me at the end of the day. You know, as I finished the series very recently, I was looking at that like a very strong juxtaposition that they were two characters doing the same thing.
Just in general terms, you think about life and you're just like, I'm sure all of you, at least I have someone that you compare yourself to, right?
Oh, of course.
Like, all right, so I won't call them like your rival, but you know what I mean,
right?
You know, like someone just like this is the person that I kind of am thinking about every time I do something.
It's almost like a mentor or a rival.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of like, okay, well, what would they do in this situation? Like, because sometimes, I'm not gonna lie, we all get stuck in a position where we're in a situation, and sometimes you don't really know what to do. So you kind of think to maybe one person, maybe a few people. It's like, what would they do in a situation? And it brings you back to circle. And I feel that with the dynamic of Dukat and Sisko, it always brought them back to circle.
All their interactions always brought them together. Granted, it's the writing, but it's also like all their actions always brought them together in different ways, like whether it was the Maquis or, quelling something or just,
or even trying to find a way around the Dominion or understanding what the Dominion was doing with Cardassia. It was all these different aspects that made one or the other think of the other side like, hey, maybe you're not so bad, but what would you do in my spot? And that's why whenever they had those episodes together, they shared something personal with each other. If it was Sisko talking about Jake or about the station or about his previous life, versus Dukat talking about his family that he was exiled from, and Cardassia that he was very proud of that was now lost and gone because the Dominion took over and he made the wrong decision. You can easily see the mirror between the two, and that's why they got along so well, and that's also why they realized at a certain point, you are pure evil and you are pure good. And I feel that while watching Deep Space Nine, if it's your first time, your second time, your multiple time watching it, you will notice the relationship between Sisko and Dukat so much more than you ever did before.
Let me get this straight. You're not responsible for what happened during the occupation. The Bajorans are.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
So, why do you think they didn't appreciate this rare opportunity you were offering them?
Because they were blind, ignorant fools. If only they had cooperated with us, we could have turned the world into a paradise. From the moment we arrived on Bajor, it was clear that we were the superior race. But they couldn't accept that. They wanted to be treated as equals, when they most certainly were not. Militarily, technologically, culturally, we were almost a century ahead of them in every way. We did not choose to be the superior race. Fate handed us that role. And it would have been so much easier on everyone if the Bajorans had simply accepted their role. But no. Day after day, they clustered in the temples and prayed for deliverance. And night after night, they planted bombs outside of our homes. Pride. Stubborn, unyielding pride. From the servant girl that cleaned my quarters, to the condemned man toiling in a labor camp, to the terrorist skulking through the hills of Dakua province. They all wore their pride like some twisted badge of honor.
And you hated them for it.
Of course I hated them! I hated everything about them! Their superstitions, and their cries for sympathy, their treachery and their lies, their smug superiority and their stiff-necked obstinacy, their earrings and their broken, wrinkled noses.
You should have killed them all.
Yes! Yes! That's right, isn't it? I knew it! I've always known it! I should have killed every last one of them. I should have turned their planet into a graveyard the likes of which the galaxy had never seen!
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode, or actually this month's episode of the BFM podcast. That's the Big Fucking Mood podcast. Again, thank you so much to my good friend Brendan here for joining us for the Deep Space Nine discussion. Thank you again, Brendan. It's been a pleasure.
Anytime, baby.
Hey, and you know what? We will catch you here very soon for some more Star Trek Shore Leave news over here in the Big Fucking Mood Podcast. Again, you can find us over social media, Big Fucking Mood Podcast on Instagram, BAAMADAM on Twitter, and the Big F Mood Podcast at gmail.com if you want to have any questions, concerns, comments over on what we're doing. If you want to have us review anything of the Star Trek nature, please let us know. We are big Star Trek fans here, let me tell you that much, buddy. But please,
hey, if you want to have a big debate about something that we said that you disagree with us, I'm ready to take your ass to the fucking curb.
Oh, both of us.
By the way,
are.
that's me. It's Brendan.
Hey, no, both of us are. You if you have a discussion,
Bring it on.
If you have a discussion to make to us, you're talking to Gold Dukat and Benjamin Sisko at the same time.
Legged Tulip.
You Legged Tulip and Gold Blanchett.
Goal Ripper.
And Gold Ripper at the same time. Come on at us. We're ready for you. Again, have a great night, folks. We'll see you next time.